The first time I saw the flashing lights bounce off the pond, my gut told me it wasn't just another HOA power play, it was going to be the moment the whole neighborhood had been waiting for. The late afternoon sun was high and golden, cutting through Oakwood Heights like it was a magazine ad for suburban paradise, but the sirens cracked through the illusion like a stone through glass. Kids stopped their bikes mid-ride, neighbors peeked from porches, and phones started recording before anyone even knew what was happening. Because when the cops came here, everyone knew it was Karen Peaton again. I heard the siren before I saw the cruiser, a thin blue flicker bouncing off the pond like a nervous heartbeat. It was the kind of bright afternoon that made Oakwood Heights look like a real estate brochure, white clouds trimmed like bakery frosting, lawns combed into careful stripes, everything pretending to be kinder than it was. But the second I saw Karen Peaton in her blazer and glossy heels standing at the water's edge, fingers stabbing the air like it could write laws by itself, I knew this wasn't going to end the way she thought. Old Elias Boone sat on the weathered bench that had matched his posture for 20 years. Some men lean against time. Elias let it lean against him. 79 sun-spotted hands, a cap from a feed mill that closed the year I graduated. The line on his rod hummed in the breeze, not a ripple of worry on his face. That's what undid me. The way he kept his calm like a private deed nobody else had the right to touch. "Officer," Karen said, stepping into the frame of every neighbor's phone, "I need this man trespassed. The pond is an HOA-controlled amenity. He doesn't have a permit. He refused to comply, and I will be pressing charges." The young cop, Morales, badge still new enough to squeak, shifted his weight like the grass might tell him what to do. He looked at Elias, then at Karen's folder, then at the small crowd gathering. Stroller moms, lawn dads, teenagers pretending not to record but angling for the best angle anyway. It was our neighborhood, neat, irritated, pretending not to, be addicted to drama, and we were all witnesses now. "Sir, do you live here?" Morales asked. Elias tipped his chin toward the cedar-sided house, peeking through the cottonwoods. "Since AO3, he said. "Before the sign got fancy, before the rules got longer than the Bible." Karen snorted. "Officer, this is not a debate. The board updated the amenities policy last quarter. Here is the official notice. The pond requires an access permit. He doesn't have one." "Read line 12, hon," Elias said softly, loud enough for the camera. It wasn't a jab. It was worse. It was an invitation. Karen's mouth twitched. She looked down, scanning. Her voice clipped along immaculate vowels in a neighborhood that never asked for them. She reached line 12 and paused, a blink too long to hide. Line 12 says, "Pending verification of recorded ownership and transfer of parcel P11 and its riparian buffer to Oakwood Heights HOA." Which, she straightened, which happened when the developer conveyed common areas to the association. "Except it didn't," Elias said, eyes never leaving the shimmer where his float kissed the water. "Parcel P11 was never conveyed. And the riparian buffer, 35 feet around the shoreline, was placed under a public trust covenant. With my family's reserved access, it's in the county records, it's in black and white." He tapped the tackle box with 2 knuckles. "And it's right here in paper older than your haircut." A murmur. Cameras tightened. Karen's smile didn't crack so much as it recalibrated. "Officer, this man is making things up." Elias pulled a manila envelope from the tackle box. Not dramatic. Tender, like he was unwrapping a photograph. He unfolded a deed with a corner browned by some long-ago coffee, and I swear the pond wind changed direction. "I used to work for the county," he said. "Survey crew, then records. The developer stood where you're standing when he signed the covenant. He got the tax break for the conservation buffer. We kept the right to keep fishing. Your board has been charging for a thing it doesn't own." Morales took the deed with both hands. He wasn't the only one leaning closer. Half the phones in Oakwood Heights were now elbow-deep in our business. Karen held her point like it was a spear. "Officer, anyone can print a fake deed," she said. "We have a permit system. It's the law here." "That's not how laws work," Janet whispered next to me. And louder, to make sure it made it onto 6 different TikToks. Morales stepped back, lifted his radio. "Dispatch? Officer Morales requesting records confirmation on parcel P11, Oakwood Heights subdivision. Need owner of record and status of any recorded covenants, transfers, and easements." He glanced at Elias with a polite apology. "This could take a few minutes?" "It took us 30 years, Elias said. "We can spare a few more." Karen pivoted for the crowd. The speech came out like she'd practiced in the mirror. "The HOA has invested significant resources in the waterfront. Safety, insurance, landscaping. We cannot allow uncontrolled access. That's how liabilities happen. That's how property values decline. This is about keeping our community premier." I'd heard that word too many times. Premier lawns, premier shades of beige, premier fines for wind chimes that dared to sing, in the wrong key. My phone buzzed. "Neighborhood group chat? Already a storm?" Someone posted an old photo of kids in mud boots fishing with Elias when the subdivision had been a rumor and the street names were still marked with contractor stakes. Someone else posted last quarter's pond access permit, 50-month. Invoice, paid under protest. A third, a PDF of the amenities addendum with a yellow highlight on line 12 and 100 eye-roll emojis. Then dispatch answered. The air went thinner. "Copy, Morales," a voice crackled. "County records show parcel P11 not conveyed to Oakwood Heights HOA. Owner of record listed as Boone Grant Public Trust. That's a conservation covenant established 1991, amended 2003. States 35-foot riparian buffer under AIR. Public access with reserved rights to the Boone family by instrument number. Stand by. 2003-4179C. Confirmed. Any fees collected for access would be unauthorized. Advise parties to cease enforcement pending county review." Morales swallowed. He looked at Karen. He looked at Elias. His mouth opened and closed like a first-day teacher's. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "it looks like the HOA doesn't own the pond or the buffer. I'm going to ask that we de-escalate. I can't trespass him from land the association doesn't control." For the love of Karen's voice spiked. "That land is valued at $2 million. She jabbed the folder at the water as if the surface would sign a confession. "We have improvements. We have insurance." 2 SUVs rolled up like punctuation marks that had lost patience. Not police, county. A woman in field boots and a navy blazer climbed out, tucking her ponytail like it was a weapon. She flashed a badge that didn't glitter. It landed. "Patricia Holloway, County Land and Records," she said. "Who's the, complainant?" Karen straightened until her spine squeaked. "I am. HOA president." Patricia didn't look impressed. She looked busy. She took Elias's deed, checked the instrument number from dispatch, and then turned to Morales. "We're issuing a field cease and desist on any HOA enforcement actions regarding this water body and buffer. I'll need the association's last 5 years of financials relevant to the pond, fees, fines, expenditures, loan documents if applicable, by close of business." "That's privileged," Karen said, too fast. "That's discoverable," Patricia said, not even blinking. A boy in a bike helmet whispered too loudly, "Is this going to be on the news?" And 3 different neighbors answered yes in 3 different tones, gleeful, exhausted, vindicated. Patricia took in the crowd like a weather report. "For now," she said, "the public trust is intact. And Mr. Boone, your reserved rights were properly recorded." She lowered her voice, but not enough to keep our microphones out. "Thank you for preserving your paperwork." Elias tipped his cap. "Kept it where my wife kept the important things," he said. "Birth, certificates, Polaroids, wedding rings in the winter. A shadow crossed the sun. For a second, I thought it was a cloud. It was a drone. It rose from behind the boathouse like an argument with props. A guy in a yellow polo with Bayland security stitched over his heart steered it with his thumbs. Another in the same polo unfolded a laminated chart like a sorcerer's map. "Private security contracted by the association," Karen announced, volume turned up to perform. "We're documenting every violation. You people won't bully me." Patricia didn't sigh. She reloaded. "You contracted security to monitor public trust land?" "Safety," Karen said. "Licensing?" Patricia asked the polo men. They traded looks that said no in legal. Morales stepped forward. "I'm going to need permits, licenses, and the scope of work for your operation," he said. The drone drifted, uncertain, and then bobbed down as if it felt shame. The slice of sun afternoon turned surgical. Patricia made calls. Morales took statements. Karen's words got sharper, and then, like most sharp things, brittle. When she said defamation, someone in the crowd laughed, and for the first time I saw the thing under Karen's posture. Fear not of being wrong, but of being ordinary, of being a person in a neighborhood, rather than its sovereign. It couldn't have been more than an hour from the siren to the apology. It felt longer because time stretches around pride. Patricia stood with her boots planted in the grass and her badge catching the kind of light that doesn't beg for attention. She read from a piece of paper, and she made Karen read too. "Effective immediately," Karen said, vowels fighting for composure. "All pond access restrictions are lifted pending county review. Any fees collected for pond access will be refunded. The HOA regrets the misunderstanding." Behind her, Elias's bobber dipped. He lifted, quick as a wink, and set the hook with a smile that made 5 kids squeal like somebody won the lottery. The fish flashed silver like an apology. You could feel the neighborhood exhale. Kids asked if they could fish with him. Parents nodded, like rules had been replaced by permission to breathe. For a few minutes, we were just people at a pond. It didn't last, but it was enough to see what it could be. It should have ended there with a refund announcement and a quiet sunset. But Karen didn't know how to lose without trying to transform it into a win. That night, an emergency board meeting materialized like a thunderhead. I wasn't inside, but the walls of our clubhouse aren't as soundproof as our secrets. The treasurer's voice trembled through drywall. "Not just the $2 million we can't claim anymore. There's an $800,000 exposure if the county assesses penalties and legal fees. And the line of credit secured against amenity valuations that included the pond could be called." Someone mentioned that Bayland Security was not only unlicensed, it was partly owned by Karen's cousin. Someone else brought up the beautification invoices from a landscaping company registered to her boyfriend's address. The auditor they brought in wore the expression of a dentist who knows the root canal is going to reveal more than nerves. Then came the part even I didn't predict. The developer's attorney, an old man carved out of courthouse benches, produced an audio recording. It wasn't new. It wasn't even digital. Somebody had transferred a cassette from a 2003 hearing when the Conservation Covenant was amended. The tape hissed like memory, and then a voice everyone recognized floated out. The developer laughing. "We're not giving them the pond, Hank. The trust stands. It's cheaper, and the Boone family will riot if we mess with their fishing." A second voice, Hank, muttered, "The HOA can market it. People read brochures, not records." They hadn't expected that cassette to survive the years. They hadn't expected Elias to keep his box of paper. They hadn't expected a county official with a spine and a habit of carrying field boots in her trunk. By morning, the story had blown through our zip code and started knocking on the state's door. HOA president calls cops on elderly veteran. County says HOA never owned pond. Local news stations said veteran because once somebody posted Elias's photo in his Navy uniform, it was over for anyone who thought this was just about fishing. He didn't correct them even when someone called him Army. He just smiled and said, "Water's the same to all of us." The state attorney general's office opened an inquiry. The real estate commission flagged Karen's license. The bank called the loan. Insurance asked unkind questions about misrepresentation. The board scheduled a special election because the neighborhood asked for it with a volume the bylaws couldn't ignore. On the day of the vote, the clubhouse smelled like coffee you drink when you're choosing a side of history. People who hadn't attended a thing in years wore stickers that said, "Hello, my name is Fed Up." The line to sign in curled past the bulletin board where flyers begged for book club members and warned about coyotes. Awkward small talk died on contact with the agenda. Karen walked to the podium like it was a cliff she could talk into moving. "I acted in good faith," she said. "I followed the documentation I was given by previous boards." A hand shot up. The widow with the two-pail mailbox. "You fined me $500, she said, voice calm enough to be dangerous, "because my beige was too warm. But did the previous board make you do that too?" Another hand. A veteran who'd been told his ramp violated sightline aesthetics. "You threatened to sue me because my body doesn't fit your symmetry. Was that good faith?" When the votes were counted, it wasn't close. 212 to 3 to remove. The three were either blind or loyal or so conflict-averse they'd circle a burning building and call it a candle. It didn't matter. The room took a breath made of years. The board's attorney, slick hair damp at the temples, stood to read the second motion. Shall the association pursue legal remedies to recover damages from former President Karen Peaton for negligence, misrepresentation, and unauthorized expenditures? You could hear paper creak in hands. You could hear the wind outside touching the pond that belonged to more than us. 198 in favor, 17 against. It wasn't a lynch mob. It was a math problem that finally got solved. Karen's color left her like a tide that promised not to return. She gathered her folders like shields that won't work anymore, heels stuttering against linoleum as if the floor regretted supporting her all this time. In the hallway, she ran into a news camera. The lens didn't care about her story. It cared about ours. And our story went like this. We remembered how to be neighbors. It wasn't instant. Funds had to be audited, refunds had to be issued. The new board had to sit with Patricia in a room that smelled like photocopied paper and figure out how to live without a fake $2 million asset propping up our pride. Property values didn't collapse. They adjusted to honesty. The pond looked the same, but it felt different. Less like a trophy, more like a belonging. We added a sign, but it didn't shout. It told a story. Oakwood Pond Public Trust Covenant, 1991. Amended 2003 35-foot riparian buffer. Fishing permitted. Please leave it better than you found it. On the first Saturday after the sign went up, Elias brought an extra rod. He didn't say why. He just set it against the bench. A kid I didn't know tried not to look interested. Elias pretended not to notice, and then said, loud enough for the air to hear, "Somebody's got to keep the catfish humble." The kid laughed like permission. Karen didn't disappear. People like that don't. They drift toward places that still sell the myth they want to buy. The state concluded its inquiries, and the Real Estate Commission revoked her license for misrepresentation. She sold her house quietly, a for sale sign appearing one dawn and gone by the next month. Rumor had it she moved to a condo downtown, where rules were simpler and nobody asked about ponds. Her cousin's security company folded under scrutiny, and the landscaping invoices were audited, revealing padded charges that led to a small settlement in the HOA's favor. The new board held its first open meeting a week later. The clubhouse was packed, standing room only, with coffee cups and folding chairs borrowed from the church down the road. They didn't talk about Premier anything. They talked about fairness. A new rule was passed. No fees for public trust land, ever. They started a fishing club for kids, led by Elias, who showed up with a thermos of coffee and a grin that said he'd seen worse storms than this. The widow with the warm beige mailbox brought cookies, and the veteran with the ramp offered to teach knot tying. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Elias shared a story that night, one he hadn't told before. He leaned back on the bench as the sun dipped, the pond turning to liquid gold. "My wife, Clara, used to sit here every summer," he said, voice soft like he was afraid to wake the water. "She'd sketch the herons, the way they stood like they owned time. When the developer came, she made me promise to keep this place free. Not just for us, but for everyone who'd ever need a quiet spot to think. That's why we signed the covenant. That's why I kept the deed." He touched the tackle box, where the photo of Clara still lived, her scarf bright against the faded Polaroid. "She'd have liked this," he added, nodding at the kids with their borrowed rods. The county didn't stop at the cease and desist. Patricia returned with a team, and by the next month, they issued a formal ruling. The HOA was fined $100,000 for unauthorized fees and ordered to refund every cent collected for pond access. The line of credit was restructured, and the bank forgave a portion of the debt after the audit cleared the new board of liability. The pond was officially designated a public trust asset, with a small plaque added to the sign, "Dedicated to Clara Boone, who kept the water free." On a Sunday, months later, I saw Karen at the farmer's market, sunglasses big enough to stage a comeback in. She pretended not to see me. I pretended not to wish her well. Then I did it anyway. We're not better than her because we won a vote. We're better when we refuse to become what we fought. She bought tomatoes. I bought honey. We stood under a sky that didn't ask for proof of ownership and let it be. One evening, the sky turned that syrup gold that makes everything look forgiven. I sat on the bench with Elias. We didn't talk about the votes or the fines or the way a single piece of paper can hold a neighborhood's soul if someone cares enough to fold it flat and keep it dry. We watched the float. We watched it tremble and then dive and then reappear like hope. "You knew it would go this way?" I asked finally. He didn't grin. He did something better. He softened. "I knew truth floats," he said. "You can push it under. You can weight it with words. But it finds the surface. That's what water does." Janet walked by with her dog, waving a leash that had seen more gossip than a church pew. Kids laughed. A heron stitched the far bank to the sky with its legs. The drone guys had found a different gig. The security polo shirts looked awkward in the thrift store rack. "Red line 12, hon," I said, and Elias chuckled until the pond chuckled back. The county sent a final letter confirming the refunds, the fine, and the public trust's permanence. Patricia stopped by in her boots, no cameras, no speeches. She leaned on the fence post and watched Elias tie a knot a Boy Scout would envy. "You kept your promise," she said. "I just kept my paperwork," he answered. She shook her head. "You kept the edge of the world from getting smaller." He looked at me then, a shimmer in his eye. "You could blame on sunlight if you wanted to. Funny thing about edges," he said. "If you share them, they become paths." On the anniversary of the day the siren flashed and the truth surfaced, Elias set the hook on a fish that fought like a rumor. He handed me the rod. "Here," he said. "Feel how it pulls. That's what honesty feels like. You don't control it, you respect it. And if you do it right, you bring it to shore without breaking the line." I did my best. It wasn't pretty. The fish leapt and the line sang and the neighbors cheered like we were all in on the same secret. When we finally netted it, Elias grinned. "Premiere, huh?" he teased, and I laughed so hard I almost dropped the truth back into the water. The new board sent out a newsletter that felt like a neighbor wrote it. The font didn't scream lawyer. The rules sounded like we planned to live under them together. A year later, the pond was still there, and so were we. Kids fished with Elias, on weekends, learning knots and patience. The widow painted her mailbox a bolder beige. The veterans' ramp became a model for accessibility upgrades across the neighborhood. The county checked in occasionally, but the pond didn't need them anymore. It had us. Karen's name faded from the group chats, not out of spite, but because we were busy living. The story didn't end with her defeat or Elias's victory. It ended with a neighborhood that learned the difference between owning and belonging, between rules and care, between a siren's scream and the water's quiet refusal. And if you're wondering whether it was worth the scandal, the fees, the headlines, the hard meeting chairs, ask the boy with the borrowed rod who screamed like the sun had caught his line the first time a bass took the hook. Ask the widow whose mailbox is now a warm beige because she likes it, not because the HOA does. Ask the veteran who wheels himself down to the water without calculating the angle of his own dignity. Ask me. I can't unhear the sound a neighborhood makes when it stops performing and starts belonging. The truth floated, just like Elias said, and the pond held it, like it always had, for anyone willing to sit still and cast a line.